You're listening to the Cash Podcast, creating affluence, success, and happiness with your financial surgeon, Adam Koós, President and Portfolio Manager at Libertas Wealth Management Group at libertaswealth.com.
All right, everyone, I'm here today with Jeanna McElroy, the owner of Senior Support Services. And for the second week in a row, we're going to be talking about things we can do to help our aging parents in times like these, and really anytime. But before we get started, as always, a few housekeeping items. If this is your first time listening or watching, then thank you so much for joining us. The Cash Podcast is produced weekly, and as stated in the intro, CASH stands for Creating Affluence, Success, and Happiness, and that's our mission. My hope is always for you to learn a little bit more on each and every episode so that you become more successful, happier, wealthier, and more educated than you were before you started listening today. So please come back often and feel free to subscribe on iTunes and YouTube. In addition, you can also follow me on Twitter at Adam Koós and on Instagram at Financial Surgeon. Last but not least, any links, visuals, charts, and other educational resources are always on our website. But that's it for the formalities. So let's go ahead and get started. And before we do, allow me to give a formal introduction here to Jeanna McElroy, who I've known for a little while. She does great work. She's the owner, like I said, of Senior Support Services, which is a private geriatric care management practice in Central Ohio. And my understanding is she's actually one of only 2 people who do this in all of Central Ohio. Is that right?
One of 4, actually.
One of 4? Okay. Yeah. Still not a lot. So one of only 4
not
people
many.
In Central Ohio. But she founded Senior Support Services 13 years ago after working in the long-term care industry for over 15 years. She's a certified geriatric care manager, a certified dementia practitioner, and a certified Alzheimer's disease and dementia care trainer. She serves on the Midwest Chapter Board of Trustees for the Aging Life Care Association and is a volunteer on the Alzheimer's Association Speakers Bureau, as well as the volunteer guardian with the Area Agency on Aging. Sorry, the puppy threw me off there. It's the times we're living in, right? But Jeanna graduated with honors from Wittenberg University right here in Ohio with degrees in both sociology and psychology. And she earned her certification in care management from the National Academy of Accreditation for Care Management. So Jeanna, thank you so much for joining us on this week's episode.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Yeah, and like I said, I've known you for a while. I'll never forget the first time we met. We met over at Panera at Easton, and we had a big, long talk. And I remember you, not to jump ahead here, but I remember you telling me this story, which just blew me away about, I believe it was 2 sisters. One lives in Chicago, one's in California, and their mom lives here, right? In Central Ohio, is that right?
Yes, actually.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I don't want to steal your fire, but I think a good way to kick off this episode would be if you would just share that story from beginning to end. I know it might be kind of a long story, but I just think that this is so powerful and speaks exactly to the kind of care that maybe at an extreme that some people might need. And especially in situations where proximity is a problem, where you're not living near, your parents.
Yes. So I received a call from the daughter who lives in California. She was sharing with me that she had recently visited with her mom, who lived in the Reynoldsburg area here in Columbus. Her mom had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease a couple years earlier. However, her mom was still in the early stages, so she was residing by herself in her private home. Her mother was starting to exhibit some of the signs of those early stages of dementia, where she was just putting things down, forgetting where she had placed them. There was some thought that maybe some of the food in her refrigerator was spoiling and she was still eating it. So the daughter called and asked me about my services and how I could start by helping. She said, when my sister and I are in town, we'll have you meet our mom. So they both came in town, and I met with both daughters at the mother's house. And the mother was gracious to let me in. She was a bit standoffish, very resistant to admitting that there were any problems. I was able to get to know her. And then the daughters left. They went back to their houses and their homes in Chicago and California, like Adam mentioned. And the idea was that I was going to start establishing some rapport with her over time. So what I started doing twice a week. Yeah.
Not an easy job.
Not an easy job at all. The daughters asked me to start visiting twice a week. So I would go to their mother's house and knock on the door. At this point, she was starting to exhibit some signs of paranoia. So sometimes I would see the little curtain beside her door move, and I could see that she was peeking out at me. I would talk to her through the closed door, through the closed glass, and tell her who I was. I explained that I was a friend of the daughters. The daughters had asked me to describe my relationship that way so that the mother would not be put off by needing help.
Yeah, right.
I continued to visit her regularly for about 6 months.
Wow.
Sometimes she would move the little curtains. Sometimes I could see her shadow in the house. Through that time, I started noticing that she had put pillows by her bay window. So I could see that she was starting to try to make it look like there was somebody lying on a couch inside the window, which I recognized as another sign of some paranoia. Of course, I'm updating the daughters on this the entire time. I would be able to say, she's still wearing the same clothes that she wore when I was here on Tuesday. It's now Friday. It doesn't seem as though she's changed her clothes. She started to look like she was losing some weight. And so I would start delivering Bob Evans soup to her, which was one of her favorites. And I would knock, tell her, "It's Jeanna. I just wanted to drop off some soup for you." I would leave it on the porch and go around the corner in my car to where I could still see the front door. And I would see her open her screen door. She would reach out, get the soup, and go back in the house.
That's
and
great.
again, I was able to get back with the daughters and say, "Look, your mom, I saw her reach out to get the soup. She at least took it into her home." That was just kind of a checkpoint for them, because at this point, they didn't have a way to be with her. They didn't even have a way to check up on her. So even
Right.
my double weekly visits, I was able to at least say, "I saw your mom. She's still walking. She's still able to open the door." Well, as time went on, she started, when she was talking to her daughters on the phone, explained that I was a Bob Evans salesperson, and I kept leaving Bob Evans
It's my
soup on the
favorite part.
So I started suggesting that, maybe I actually take lunch and she come out on the porch and eat. Well, I couldn't get her to do that. I did sit on her porch one day and I had soup. She had her soup inside and we kind of talked through the glass. And then it seemed to be after about 6 to 7 months, all of a sudden she would open her door when I would knock and she would stand on the front porch with me. Then over time, probably another 4 to 5 months, she actually let me in the front door and we would stand in the doorway. Then after a good year to a year and a half, I was able to actually get into her house. She saw me as a good friend. The idea of me being a Bob Evans salesperson seemed to pass. And then at that time, I became that familiar face to her and somewhat of a comfort to her. So I was able to then introduce some home health services for her. And of course, I introduced each caregiver myself. I was there with her when they would come for the first time. And there were some little hurdles that we had to get over, but I ended up kind of being that staple for her.
Yeah.
I didn't know at one point if I'd ever get past that Bob Evans sales rep title, but I did. And still to this day, it's now been 4.5 years since I've been working with her. And while she now lives in a memory care unit,
Okay.
I still am able to see her and I'm still that familiar face. So
That's
she
great.
has someone here that is watching out for her.
It's just, and that the amount of, every time I hear that story, the amount of patience that you had to exhibit and practice is not, I don't have that patience. I'm just gonna be honest. I don't know how you did it. I mean, that's really impressive.
Well, I would get some Bob Evans soup for myself too.
That's a good point. I guess you did get Bob Evans soup out of it. Yeah. Well, I mean, most people don't really know where to find help for things like this. I mean, obviously that was a pretty extreme example.
Sure.
Obviously a very great story. But there's people of all shapes and sizes, right? That different types of care needed, low level of care, maybe people who don't even have any need yet, but you're just trying to get an assessment done to find out, is everything okay? Is it not? And kind of look for markers. But I mean, like I said, people don't even know where to find help when they need it. I mean, where should they start looking for that help?
Well, just when you're building a house, you know that there are lots of different specialists that are needed, whether it be plumbing, electric. So having that general contractor there kind of as the glue that holds all of the pieces together, that is very much how we as geriatric care managers function. So starting with working with a geriatric care manager, we then can go in and identify all of the areas of need So kind of identify all those little pieces to the puzzle. And our goal then is to help get all of those pieces of the puzzle put together so that at the end, that person has all of their care needs met and they have this beautiful picture. The beautiful picture meaning that each day they're experiencing joy and they have the highest quality of life and the most independence as possible.
Okay. And I mean, where do people go? I mean, obviously that's what you do for a living, right?
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
I'll mention the website again later, but I mean, your website's seniorsupportservicesohio.com.
Exactly.
I mean, when we talk about care, I guess, I mean, is care facility, a care facility the only option for somebody who needs assistance care? I mean, obviously you helped this person in her home for quite a while.
Absolutely.
I think a lot of people want to stay at home.
Yes.
What are their options, I guess?
Yes. Well, and while a lot of people want to stay at home, and that really can be a very great environment, there comes a time when you have to weigh the cost and benefits of moving into a care facility. So at home, someone may have limited socialization, and that socialization
Sure.
is so key to helping our brains stay stimulated, to helping us have happiness and joy each day. It certainly helps us just get through with the support that we get through that socialization. So sometimes socialization is the issue that leads someone to needing a care facility. Other times it might be that their care needs increase to the point. So what we can do is we get to know our clients on a very close rapport and know what their preferences are. And so we're able to recognize, okay, we're getting to the point where this person is no longer safe in their home. Perhaps it's someone who is
I
no
see.
longer able to get up the steps to get to their shower. And while you might think, okay, well, we can just do a sponge bath in the sink, that can work for a time, but at the same time, we have to look at skin integrity. And you don't want the skin
Yeah.
to degrade and then lead to wounds, which can lead to infections. So there are all types of different issues that come up that will lead someone into needing that care facility at that time.
Okay. And I think that at the onset of, we'll say, potential issues with memory care, dementia, Alzheimer's, I think, people forget things all the time. I mean, I forget things. This morning I was dropping off my son at his golf camp, and I remember brushing my teeth this morning thinking, oh, I've got to email myself this thing because this is a really, really, important thing. I want to email myself so I don't forget. And sure enough, I'm in the car and I can't even listen to my son talk because I'm so angry at myself for not emailing myself because I forgot to email myself. And of course, I still don't know what that thing was that was supposedly so important. So, I mean, everybody forgets things. I forget things all the time. But I mean,
Exactly.
you've helped some of my clients in the last few years, and I know I don't want to steal your fire here, but I mean, how do you know if it's dementia or just forgetfulness and something
Right.
else? What do you do to assess, I
Yeah.
guess, and determine what's going on,
Yeah.
if
So
anything?
one of the keys is dementia is definitely something that impacts your day-to-day life. Let me clarify. So dementia is often used synonymously with Alzheimer's disease.
Hmm.
Actually, Alzheimer's disease is a type of dementia.
Right.
There are many different types of dementia. You may have heard of Lewy body, frontotemporal dementia. There's dementia that develops from Parkinson's, vascular dementia from like a stroke. So Alzheimer's is just one type of dementia. But something common with all of those dementias is that, again, it impacts your daily life. So let's say, for example, you misplace your keys. That happens to all of us.
All the
And
time.
I know as we get older, we sometimes start to think, oh my gosh, is my brain going? If you end up finding
No,
your keys, close to your purse or by your shoes, that's not a problem. If you end up finding your keys in the freezer, that
that's a problem.
might
Yeah.
be a sign
I mean,
that there's something.
if you're just forgetting things where you put things, then
Yes.
both of my sons have dementia. So,
Yes,
I mean, but anyway,
exactly.
yeah. So putting your keys in the
Exactly.
freezer, obviously that's a problem.
Right,
I
right.
put
And if
I put the cereal in the refrigerator before. Maybe I need an assessment.
we have actually put frozen chicken patties in the pantry before, and 2 weeks later played Find That Smell in the
That's
kitchen.
nice. Yeah.
But yes, so if it's impacting your day-to-day life, not just an isolated incident, but something that truly, you find that you are missing appointment after appointment,
Yeah.
or perhaps you have gotten multiple late notices for utility bills that weren't paid or disconnection notices, those are all signs that maybe there's something going on where some of those executive functioning tasks are diminishing for you. So paying bills, keeping track of prescriptions, keeping track of medications. Again, those are things that are going to impact your day-to-day life. So that's the difference between just forgetfulness and actually maybe a memory problem or a different type of dementia.
And when you help somebody, let's just say it's, I don't know, married couple, one spouse feels like there's no issue whatsoever, but they feel like maybe their husband or their wife might be having some early onset issues. Obviously, it's a delicate matter. Sometimes maybe the spouse that might have the issues doesn't want to believe they have any problems, right? So, I mean, how do you approach those situations delicately, of course, but how do you approach those situations and kind of broach the topic and get into, I don't know, get into those details that are obviously very sensitive and sometimes not the most pleasant,
Exactly.
right?
My work is very individualized, so I definitely recognize the sensitivity in those situations. So sometimes I've been like with the client with the Bob Evans soup, I was introduced as the daughter's friend. Sometimes with, say, the healthy spouse, they will introduce me as a friend, someone who can help them be able to stay at home and age well. And I can get the assessment. So as I do a comprehensive assessment to identify what all of the needs are, I don't sit there with a flip
Notepad.
pad in front of me, yes, taking notes. I do it through conversation and, to be able to see how they're doing functionally. For example, how well they're able to get up and down the steps. I may ask that they give me a tour of their home. And of course, as I'm going through, I'm commenting on the decorating or on a certain photo on the wall. I may say, oh, tell me who's in this picture. And that gives me an indication. Are they able to recognize the people? Yes. If they tell me, oh, yes, I shower in this bathroom all the time. Then after the fact, the healthy spouse may say, he hasn't gotten in that shower for months,
Right.
But it does give me an opportunity to gather the information I need in a very informal way. And it comes across as just a social get together. I'm just there for a visit and to see their house.
That's brilliant. And obviously for two consenting adults, then it's probably super easy and you can get out the flip pad, right? But
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yes.
Well, let's change gears a little bit. I mean, obviously, we haven't even talked about, the coronavirus pandemic, and I don't know about you, but I think a lot of people are tired of hearing about it.
Yes.
But some people have been wondering right now. I was just talking to Barbara McVicker last week, and some people have been wondering if they should move their loved ones from a facility back home to keep them healthy, because obviously a high percentage of those who've been passing away due to COVID have been in nursing facilities, memory care facilities, and so on. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, this is definitely a legit concern and something I have heard from a lot of people. We want to protect our loved ones who are in care facilities, and it is frightening to hear that there are cases coming up right and left in those care facilities. One thing that I caution families, though, is going home is not always the best option.
Okay.
If they are in a care facility, obviously they are needing care. And that means that they are going to need care when they go home. For, the son or the daughter, they think, oh, I'm working from home now. I can take care of my mom and dad in the home. Caregiving is a full-time job and it is very draining. And especially right now, I think we're all having to, on a day-to-day basis, fight for our mental health, our emotional health. There's constant change and uncertainty. And so to already have that stress, to then also add on the caregiving stress, that can just be overwhelming.
For sure.
But also to get that care in the home, that's when you would utilize like a home health company. But you have to remember, you're going to be introducing multiple different people into your home every day to take care of your loved one. You cannot control where those caregivers are on their off hours.
Got it.
The same is true in a care facility. However, in the home, it's more difficult to have a certain set of protocol and regulations that are followed. It's harder to regulate what the caregivers are doing. So I do, always tell families, really give it some thought. It sometimes can be less expensive for someone to pay for a care facility around the clock rather than having people come into the home around the clock.
Okay. So kind of just depends on the person in question, where they are, maybe with how many cases are appearing in the facility in question. Okay. I mean, along
Absolutely.
those same lines, obviously we're talking about, somebody who is in a facility and whether we should bring them home or not. What about the flip side of that coin? I mean, what about, one of the things I hear from a lot from our clients, as we go through the financial planning process and we talk about aging and things of that nature, estate planning and so on. Many say they'd rather forego the nursing home route altogether and instead stay in their own home. I'm sure you see this a lot too, but what about individuals who aren't exhibiting any symptomatic behavior? People who are completely healthy today, but trying to plan for the future. Does it make sense to put any sort of preparations in place now, as opposed to waiting until there's an actual issue when it arises, from the standpoint of memory care, dementia, any of these cognitive issues you're talking about?
Mhm. Yes, absolutely. In fact, before there's a problem is the best time to plan for the future. And with that planning, to have someone come in, such as myself, to do a comprehensive assessment where all of the needs are going to be identified. It could be that at this time there are no care needs or very few care needs. Maybe it's just one or two prescriptions, or a diagnosis that's well managed right now. This is the best time to have that assessment done, because that assessment then can serve as a great baseline, which helps us identify changes going forward. So I worked with one client. It was a couple. They both ended up having an assessment done. Neither one of them really had any care concerns or care issues at that point. I started visiting them on a regular basis. And when I went back to see them, we visited quarterly. When I went back 3 months later, I still noticed no changes, but that's still good.
Okay.
At 6 months, though, we started noticing that the wife was having some changes in her cognition. So I was able to reassess and use that cognitive tool that I use to do the assessment and identify what areas of the brain are actually being impacted by the
Mm,
deterioration.
okay.
And we noticed that there were several areas she was struggling with. So we were then able to connect her with the neurologist. And we took that report to the neurologist. So that neurologist was able to say, okay, so 6 months ago, here is where she was
Got it.
cognitively. Here we are 6 months later, and we're seeing deficits in this part of the brain and this part of the brain. And it allowed him to appropriately diagnose. And it was an early diagnosis. So the
Great.
treatment, there was more treatment available, and we were able to start on it earlier to control those symptoms so that she could live more days symptom free than if she had waited until actually there was a crisis and they call me in the middle of the night because she had wandered out of the house saying, we need some help. We can avoid some of those situations and scary crises that not only cost a lot of money, but can cost your independence as well
Right.
by doing things proactive. And I would say proactive planning is the best way to stay independent as you age.
That's great. I mean, I assumed you would say that, but I guess I didn't honestly think about the fact that by being more proactive, you could much more easily catch an early diagnosis and thus live a much more normal life for a much longer time than if you just don't do anything and you kick the can down the road and procrastinate because you just don't want to deal with it. And honestly,
Exactly.
I don't blame anybody who doesn't want to deal with it, right? It's not fun, right? I mean,
Right. Very true.
um, and then I guess kind of along those same lines, I mean, my understanding is that even when people think they're completely healthy, with no memory care or dementia symptoms whatsoever, my understanding is that sometimes you can find markers or clues, that perhaps there is that early onset behavior that might act as warning signs. I know you've kind of touched on a couple in your stories you told earlier, but what kinds of things specifically are you looking for, and what are some of the things that people watching and listening to this can look out for with their own spouses and parents to catch maybe something coming up a little bit early before they reach out to someone like yourself?
Mhm. So I think, especially, let's use a couple as an example. You live together day to day, and it's more difficult to notice changes in someone if you're seeing them every single day, day in and day out. So to have somebody who is seeing them maybe on a quarterly basis, those changes can be identified a little bit easier. So I have found a lot of times that when I go in and meet with a couple, I will actually talk with each of them separately, because over time, I've noticed a lot of couples compensate for each other's weaknesses
Oh,
While
really?
I think that that can be a good thing, at the same time, it can hide a lot of deficits. So, for example, I had a client just recently and her husband passed. We knew that my client had Alzheimer's, but her husband was
Hmm.
doing so much to cover for her deficits that even the son did not realize the gravity of how much care she required. So, upon his father's death, he realized, oh my goodness, I need help and I need it quickly for my mom. So a lot of times I think, you can see things again with the bills, maybe missing some bills, getting those late notices, disconnection notices. You might
Yeah.
notice your parent or loved one using Post-it notes a lot more.
Ah,
While Post-it notes and taking notes, that's definitely a very healthy brain activity to help with memory. But I guess some of the problem comes in if you see a Post-it note on the appliances in the kitchen that say microwave or oven, identifying those objects, that's showing that that person is not necessarily recognizing what those objects are for. And
okay.
that's when you get those cases of kitchen fires and some
Ooh,
really
yeah, yeah,
devastating news that we hear at times.
yeah. Okay. I guess that's probably when things have gotten pretty far along, but maybe they've done a really good job of hiding it, or as you put it, maybe the spouse has done a good job of helping them hide it.
Exactly.
Um, I mean, one of the biggest hassles I think that I've learned over the years when it comes to memory care dementia and even just aging in general is dealing with all the different doctors' prescriptions, making sure that different doctors aren't prescribing medications that might not interact so well with, another a patient might be taking. Let's just say, most people don't know this, but medical malpractice
Mhm.
has been ranked the number 3 killer in America.
Mhm.
And it's not just doctors' errors. People immediately think, oh, what the doctors do. I mean, it's because of our problems too. With lack of communication between the patient and the medical practitioners, lack of having advanced healthcare directive, let's just say. But with regard to specifically to prescription drugs, what advice might you give to people about avoiding these potential life or death issues that might seem like, oh, that'll never happen to me, but obviously are very, very serious.
Mhm. Yes, I think one of the biggest problems is that people will be seen not only by a primary care physician, but also have different specialists.
Mm,
Maybe they have some supplements, just vitamins or oils that they're using. It is important that every single provider knows every single medication you are taking. So, what I find a lot of times is someone will go to their specialist, and that specialist will prescribe a new medication, but the communication does not make it back to the primary care doctor. The person goes in that primary care doctor, say 6 months to a year later, that primary care doctor prescribes another medication for an issue that comes up at that time, still without the knowledge of what that specialist had prescribed a year ago. And it's possible that those medications can interact very negatively. So, again, it's not necessarily the doctors not knowing the interactions, but just simply not knowing the person is taking that medication to begin with.
sure.
Pharmacists are good about looking at medication lists and knowing about the drug interactions. It's very important that the communication between the physicians is clear enough that it's understood why that medication was prescribed and for the time that it was prescribed. I've had lots of clients who have, or they're still taking medication that was prescribed for them 20 years ago. They've gone to the same primary care physician, and those physicians have a lot of patients that they're seeing, and sometimes it takes a new set of eyes, an outside party to be an advocate for that client and say, hey, it's been a while since we've looked at this medication list. Let's step back and take a look at
Smart.
this.
Yeah.
As we
Changes, right?
age, medications impact people over the age of 65 sometimes very differently than they will for those in younger generations. And it's really important for the physician to clearly know what those side effects are going to be for that population. So I often recommend that my clients see a geriatrician. That's a person who specializes in working with people in that population of age 65 and older, when our bodies interact differently to medications. And
Okay.
sometimes what will work for a 40-year-old does not work the same for an 80-year-old.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, it's interesting you say that about the medication list because one of the things we literally, I don't think I've even told you about this. One of the things we literally just started doing this past month, it took a couple of years to put together and organize, because it's an immense initiative here at our office for our clients, is something we're calling a My Promise Kit. And it's a combination of all the, with relation to this discussion. I mean, obviously there's things in there like vehicle titles, property deeds, life insurance, investment statements, powers of attorney for financials and things of that nature. But with regard to our conversation specifically, it also includes, advanced healthcare directive, a medication list, supplement lists. We not only have it in paper form in hanging files, but we put it online in what we call the My Promise Vault. So it's encrypted and uploaded for not only them, but their family members. If they're out of town, they can access it 24/7. And I'll throw a picture up here. And for those of you who are on iTunes listening and can't see what we're talking about, I'll put a picture up here as well. It's on our website if you want to check it out. But we also have USB keys we've been giving away that go on their keychain that have all that information on it and can be updated on a regular basis at every meeting. That way that, because, I mean, let's be honest. I mean, there's not enough people have their financial house in order, especially as it relates to their medical house, we'll call it. And I think that when they go to the hospital, most people don't have it with them. So even those who have been responsible and proactive, you end up at the hospital, or you need, to talk to one of your, five different medical practitioners. And if you don't have it with you, what's the point of having it at all? Right. So,
right.
But speaking of, medical practitioners, I don't mean to go back to coronavirus again, but you and I were talking just before we started today about how, businesses are reopening, continue to reopen. I know some states are closing things again, but elective surgeries are becoming something that we're allowed to do again. So whether it's elective or not, one of the big myths I understand you told me before, and you can elaborate, is that when someone needs to go and have surgery, and maybe they're whether they're in a nursing home or not, I mean, we're specifically talking to somebody who's not in a nursing home, they're told, well, after surgery, we need you to go into a nursing home. We need you to do physical therapy at a different facility and so on. Can you clarify truth from reality here with regard to Medicare, who pays for it or what's paid for?
Yes, absolutely. That's a lot of people go in that situation and think, oh, Medicare will cover. If you've not been in the hospital at all within the last 60 days, traditional Medicare will cover the first 20 days of your rehab stay at 100%.
Okay.
Day 21 to 100, there is a daily copay. If you have a supplemental insurance, typically that supplemental plan will pick up that copay. But a lot of people definitely go in thinking, oh my gosh, I've definitely, I don't have to pay anything. Medicare is going to cover it all. And it absolutely won't.
Okay. What's the total? Would you just say, so it's 20 days, 100%, and then how many with the copay?
21 to 100. So you have 100 days, up to 100 days that Medicare will cover some. Day 1 to 20 is 100%, as long as you've not been in the hospital in the last 60 days. Let's say that you went in, you had your surgery 30 days ago, you go in for your surgery, then you come out for rehab and you spend 10 days in a rehab center.
Okay.
And 30 days later, you need to go back into that rehab center. Those 10 days still are going to count. So you'll be down to 90 days.
Got it.
And then you'll only have again until day 20 that is covered at 100%.
Okay.
So it's definitely important to take a look at how many hospitalizations you have had, how many rehab stays you have had as well. Another huge key is Medicare will cover that 100% for the first 20 days and day 21 to 100, as long as you had a 3-day qualifying hospital stay where you are not just an observation, but you are actually in admission status, and it has to be 3 overnights. So let's say that you go into the ER. Let's say you have a broken hip, you've had a fall, you go into the ER, they put you in observation day 1, day 2, you have your surgery, day 3, you're discharged to the rehab center. You think, oh my goodness, well, I definitely, have Medicare on my side. If you are not officially moved into admission status at the hospital for the full 3 days, it will not count. If you only have 2 overnights, if you have any questions about what Medicare is going to cover or your status at the hospital in terms of admission versus observation, they do have an appeals process. But that is something
Probably
actually
takes
that
time though.
it does. And it's been something that numerous clients of mine have had issues with. So typically when one of my clients goes into the hospital, I immediately say, let's find out what this status is and what is the doctor thinking. If they're thinking there's any chance you're going to be there 3 or more days, let's go ahead and get you into that admission status so that you can enjoy those benefits from Medicare that you've paid into and that you're eligible for.
That makes sense. I guess, the 100 days, it's something we've always talked about with just nursing home as a blanket advice or blanket education, but I wasn't aware of all those details.
Mm-hmm.
We're kind of running out of time here, but I have to ask you one more question.
Sure.
because of the career you're in and because of this virus going on and because of the demographic you're working with, I mean, you're working in a very, very high risk environment, obviously, where you have to be very careful. Have you by chance run into anyone where you found yourself face to face with the virus yet?
Yes. So recently in care facilities here in Columbus, they have opened up the opportunity for us to do outside social distance, 6 feet apart visits. So I have been able to see my clients face to face in those care facilities. I was visiting weekly with my client. He has Alzheimer's, is on a memory care unit, not able to speak up for himself. He did have some chronic swallowing issues. So at times when he would eat, he would aspirate, which would cause him to cough a little bit. But I noticed during one of my visits that his cough sounded a little different. And so I asked the staff to get a chest x-ray. And I also asked that they test him for COVID. The facility was a little hesitant at first.
Sure.
Obviously, I think everybody—
don't want to have a COVID case, right?
Yeah. Exactly. But it's better to have one than
For
30
sure.
in your facility. Luckily, his COVID test came back negative.
Oh, good.
But I tell you that 3 days, even though I had not really been close to him, and of course I had a mask, I actually had double mask on, an N95 with another mask on top, and we were outside and social distanced, I still was very careful that weekend who I was around and frightened for myself as well. But found out it was a negative test, but he did have pneumonia. So we were able to get him on an antibiotic. We recognized that early. But again, I think seeing someone every single day, and there's already a chronic cough problem, sometimes it takes an outside person who hasn't seen him for a week to realize, oh, this sounds a little bit different than last week. So again, that just shows how easily things can be mistaken, especially for spouses living in a house together when they see each other every day, or we watch our parents and their needs increase. We see them regularly and we don't necessarily notice those changes or just rationalize them away thinking, oh, she just likes Post-it notes all of a sudden. So
Right.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, ironically enough, the coronavirus obviously affects everybody differently, but in the worst cases, my understanding is that the symptoms are very, very similar to that of pneumonia. So it's important, I think, to obviously make sure that they're deciphering between one or the other. Obviously, they're both dangerous, of course, but especially the elderly population. But
yes.
yeah.
Well, and in that case, that client had to be isolated in his room for those 3 days, which broke my heart.
Oh, yeah.
Because I talked about the benefits of socialization and things, but I did think that the cost outweighed the benefits, or the benefits outweighed the cost there.
Yeah.
And it was most important to make sure that we kept him safe and everybody else.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you have to. I mean, it's 3 days, right? I mean, I know that's tough, the loneliness and isolation, but it's temporary for a good cause, I suppose. Yeah.
Yes. And better than 2 weeks, I guess. So
I guess that's true. Yeah. Right. Well, on that note, thank you again so much. If those of you who are listening, those of you who are watching, if you're looking for someone to speak at a seminar on aging, or if you're in the healthcare profession or nursing profession and you're watching or listening to this, Jeanna can also provide education and training on dementia to caregivers and care facility staff. That's something that she does on a regular basis. So, and again, if you'd like to get more information on Jeanna or reach out to her, contact her with any other questions, check out her website, which again is seniorsupportservicesohio.com. And again, you can call her, email her by heading out to that website. And Jeanna, thank you again so much for being here and offering so much valuable information, education. I really appreciate it. And I really think that this is going to be a great topic that people need to be thinking more about and paying more attention to. And of course, I don't think there's enough education out there on these topics.
Absolutely. Well, Adam, thank you so much for the opportunity to
For
speak.
sure.
I appreciate it. Yes.
You're very welcome. All right. Well, that's it for today's episode. We realize, again, there are thousands and thousands of podcasts out there, and you chose to listen to ours. So thank you so much for listening, for watching. Be sure to subscribe on both iTunes and YouTube. Please feel free to share this podcast with your friends. And if you want more educational information, you can sign up on our website at libertaswealth.com to receive our screencasts, videos, and articles that we send out on a regular basis. Again, you can follow me on Twitter at Adam Koós, on Instagram at Financial Surgeon. So thank you so much again for joining us today, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Cash Podcast with your financial surgeon, Adam Koós. To see any charts or images that were mentioned in this show, or to check out additional articles, videos, and other educational resources, head over to libertaswealth.com.